Bonnie should come. Sounded like Spencer.
Yeah, I saw Spencer here a few minutes ago. When he saw me come, he decided to leave. Is that it?
He has a class.
Yeah. But you can sit up here, and no one else is coming. So even though we're not starting with a quiz like we did for 2/3 of the class last semester, would we like to start with prayer anyway?
Oh, yes, we should.
Okay.
What's your name? Sam, would you like that? Sure.
Dear Heavenly Father, we grateful that we're able to speak with you today. We have to learn more about geology and genomics, and grateful that we have to be give you our education, I guess, is help us to be able to help the Spirit with us. God, this day, we know what we do. Guide us and protect us. And we're grateful for the faculty and the school has to bless them as well.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So if you recognize this slide, it means you probably took my class 460. We're not going to do exactly the same lecture, but I pirated some of the great pictures. Yes, because
Your own material.
yes,
That's a sulfite.
that's a sulfite. But let's start with this. So you can see Valle d'Aosta, which is the place where we're going, and we're going to drive up. Oops. This is the place that we're going. That's the mine. You can see. If I figure out how to use it, that little mine portal right there. We're going to be walking up this steep trail, but it's not very long. We'll probably take 20 minutes to get there, but it's not going to be terrible. And you can see that it's got some pretty large tailings here, and as European mines go. But you know, this is a drop in the bucket to the size of Bingham or something like that. But this mine has been mined for 1,500 years, maybe 1,000 or two. Could have been mined prior to the time of Christ, but we just don't know. We don't have good slag samples where we can get good ages at that time. But the Romans were up there, and probably didn't take long for them to discover that there was something valuable in this area. So you can see how nice everything looks. It's almost Disneyland-esque. They've got places that are fenced off, and you can see train tracks. And inside here you can see cases of what looks like dynamite, which really isn't, but it's very pedestrian. But still, you can see lots of eclogite on these dumps. And you'll all be able to get some great samples of eclogite hosting massive sulfide deposits. So, and the reason you didn't get this lecture 2 weeks ago is because I was having this done, and that's why I couldn't make it that particular day. Can you see those? Do you think they probably can see those in the slides? I don't know. There's going in the tunnel with nice hard hats, but it doesn't go back very far. I thought I'd show you the map. And this is down in the bottom of the valley right here. This is kind of turned sideways, so you really can't see it. But what we're going to do is we're going to drive up this very switchbacky road and make sure you look outside and don't get car sick. But we're going to park about right here. He may go as far as here, but we're going to stop someplace here and then hike up this road. Like I say, it's not long. And he says we'll be able to take about a 3.5 hour tour to see everything here at this mine site. It's very unique in terms of being mined for 1,000 years. But it reminds me of when we did the tour of Herculaneum down by Vesuvius. You could see the entire area had been covered with hot ash, ash flow tuff, and had killed a lot of people. But then they built cities right around it, and you can see the construction 1,000 years ago was exactly the same as what they're doing today. Hadn't changed a bit. And you're going to see the same sort of thing here. These mining methods they've used probably around the year 800 are the same mining methods they've used in the 18 and 1900s. And this wasn't actually closed until 1957. So at the end, I'll show you the pictures of students who went up there with me about 10 years ago. So this is getting kind of boring. So let's, yes?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't mining practices changed significantly, like over that period of time?
Yes.
Or did they? How come they kept going that same way? Or were the ancient Romans like statistically like a lot better at mining than we were for a long time? Is that they kept doing it, or why didn't they update and modernize?
It's a good question. You know, why don't the people that live around Naples update their construction techniques? They do it exactly the same way they've done it for 1,000 years. And most of the modernizations basically happened since World War II. And so, very good question.
It's stick to what works.
That's exactly right. Okay, well,
First-dimensional Luddites is all they are.
so this mine that we're going to be going to is a volcanogenic massive sulfide mine where they had sulfides like this, where the sulfides were layered. What do you think this layer is right there, Brett? What would you guess? Or Joshua? Or Michael? What's that layer right there?
Molybdenite.
No. Molybdenite is a little more steel gray. This is kind of a beige colored tan.
Crocodile.
No.
Pentlandite?
Pentlandite, pyrrhotite probably. It's pentlandite, pyrrhotite, plus what's this yellow? Chalcopyrite. You can all get that. So
That's why I said
but what happens is volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits. Let's see if we can go forward or backwards. Apparently not. Is this where you have the ocean? You can see the ocean liner out here and ocean water, and they're formed at mid-ocean ridges. So you can see extension going each way. What's driving extension? What's the driving force for extension? You should know this.
not ridge push.
Not ridge push. Isn't that amazing with the eclogite that's pulling it down each way? is overcoming the frictional forces on the bottom of the ocean floor, and it's pulling so hard that it is pulling this ridge open and allowing volcanism to occur. So what's this black smoke coming out of there?
Black smokers.
But what's the smoke made of?
Sulfides.
Sulfide. There's no smoke at all. So it shows that there's great plumes of smoke, but it's really finely divided sulfides that give the water a black color.
If it's white, it's sulfates, right?
If it's white, it's anhydrite. Yep, that's exactly right. So we're going to get to that part. But, well, let's not jump ahead. So, you can see pictures of it right here. So what do you think this is? A black smoker, white smoker? White smokers, black smokers, what? Something in between? Gray smoker. And how high do these chimneys get?
Hundreds of meters, right?
Maybe 50 to 100, but we don't really know, because how many of these have we seen actually compared to the history of the Earth? Probably, a trillionth of a percent of the black smokers that have existed on Earth, but we have very, very little knowledge of exactly what's happened. So, since the history of massive sulfide deposit is so short, as a matter of fact, when I was a grad student, they had just been discovered. Hard to believe. And that was why my advisor was on the cutting edge of research, because they had just found a few of these with a deep sea submersible, and it was hot stuff. And so I'm going to have you look at the same Bill Nye the Science Guy that I showed you in economic geology, because this YouTube video is so good. Yes, it's a little long, but you need to think about it. And I'm going to ask you penetrating questions to see if you really listened to this Bill Nye the Science Guy YouTube video.
The bottom's on right. Touch the bottom right. You just click it up like one.
Once. In 1977, a deep-sea submarine descended over 8,000 feet. Its mission? To investigate hydrothermal activity on the ocean floor. Marine explorer Robert Ballard was aboard. He detected a dramatic change in the ocean's temperature.
We were not expecting what we found. We were expecting to find water, and we had a camera inside the vehicle, but it was just taking pictures, so we didn't know what we had till we came back. We brought it up to the surface, and we processed the film, and we knew the spot where the temperature spike was, and it was like going to Disneyland. Probably one of the biggest biological discoveries ever made on Earth was made that day.
Ballard and his team were the first to see it, face to face. Hydrothermal vents.
How hot do you think that stuff is?
Immense chimney-like structures, several stories high.
350 degrees
Spewing water
Celsius.
geysers, black with
350.
minerals and nutrients. The temperature around these deep-sea vents was a scorching 760 degrees Fahrenheit. And then an astonishing sight. Life, thriving without sunlight. A biological community never seen before. An exotic garden of marine life. Species without eyes. Others resembling Triassic-era fossils, over 200 million years old.
What we totally were blown away by were these giant tube worms, 8, 9, 10 feet tall. And when you cut them, they bled human-like blood. I mean, when the submarine landed, there was a squish, and red blood came up around all the portholes. And that's how eerie it was. And then to find these extremely unusual creatures living in this oasis. It had no relationship to the normal life of the deep sea. And yet here they were living in this toxic water. But yet these creatures were thriving on it. And then when we dissected, I remember we took one of these clams, and we opened it up in the first place. Whew, as soon as we opened it up, it stunk.
Hydrogen sulfide.
Horrible smell. Rotten eggs. Yeah. And we opened it up, and then we looked, and it didn't look, it looked like beef. It was red, bright red. And it didn't have an anatomy of a clam. It was like, what happened to the clam? Someone had taken over its body. And that something was a bacteria. A tiny bacteria that had figured out over eons of time how to duplicate photosynthesis in the dark chemically through a process we now call chemosynthesis. And that was the discovery, that there was another life system on Earth that did not go by the book that you and I read, that was not living off the energy of the sun, but was living off the energy of the Earth itself. And that really opens up the ballgame, I'll say. And these bacterium, we now think are the largest mass of living things on Earth.
They're in the rocks.
In the whole mountain range. If you added up all the people and all the living things on land and add up all the creatures in the ocean and the few things in the sky, and you got a number of so many tons, there's more tons of biomass. We used to think, that the insects rule the earth. Wrong. These bacterium.
So where are these vents?
All over the earth. They were, imagine a baseball with a seam on it. That seam begins beneath the polar ice caps, goes down through the Atlantic, into the Indian Ocean, across the Pacific. It runs around the Earth for 42,000 miles. It's the largest feature on Earth, the mid-ocean ridge, and it's underlain by literally tens of thousands of magma chambers.
Is that where life began in the hot springs?
Well, that's what people are now thinking. The biology books that we were reading have now been thrown away.
Yeah.
And they're right.
Everything had to be on the surface.
That's right. And you had this soup and a lightning bolt hit it and you formed all sorts of amino acids and things like that. But now what we think is that the hydrothermal vents may have been the site of life on Earth. It's also given us a new prospecting tool for searching for it elsewhere within our own solar system. We're now looking at a moon of Jupiter called Europa, which we think has an ocean. We think it has underwater volcanoes, and there should be life down there. The question is, how smart are their clams?
Did hydrothermal vents give birth to the first primitive microbes on Earth? Perhaps. But one thing is certain. Their discovery challenged long-held beliefs about the conditions necessary for creating life. And once life happened, there was no stopping it.
So, what was the most remarkable thing, in your opinion, from what you just saw there? Yes, Brett.
Just how much life is centered around it.
Yeah, and that there are so many of these vents. He was not exaggerating. There are probably tens of thousands of magma chambers spewing black smokers and white smokers all the time. It's just that we've only discovered a fraction, because how far down do you have to go to see one of these things? Yeah, a few miles. It's not an easy journey. And, getting a submersible that can withstand those pressures is just not an easy thing to build and maintain. Anything else? Yeah, the squish sounded really good. When you smash 8-foot-long clams. Yeah. Anything else? And they are chemoautotropic. They're probably living off the hydrogen sulfide that's spewing out of these vents. And they take the hydrogen sulfide and oxidize it and get energy from that. That's why these clams stink. Hydrogen sulfide is the source of all good things. I shouldn't say that. That's kind of sacrilegious. But still, hydrogen sulfide really is amazing. With the combination of oxygen, that's another source of life, just like photosynthesis. Anyone else? Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting how you said how much biomass is down there. It's mostly not just the tube worms and the macro life that we see, but just the microbial life. And you say that so the vents themselves made up partially of microbial life then, or they just live on the substrate of the rocks?
No. microbial life. There's a lot of it. It's not as dramatic as the tube worms. 10-foot long tube worms is a much cooler story than bacteria that oxidize sulfur. Anything else? I'm sure you. Yeah, Joshua.
So, how long do these hydrothermal vents last? Because it seems like when hydrothermal vent stops, everything there is going to die.
That's right. And then they got to migrate to the next place along the ridge where a new episode of magma is erupting, and then shortly after the magma erupts, then you have hot rock and the vents start, and they kick in and start cooling off that area of the ridge. And they just go back and forth, and the ridge is constantly being pulled apart, and so this community of life and black smoker just migrates up and down the vents and has for 4 billion years. I just think we underestimate what an important process this is. Yes?
So, since oceanic crust isn't necessarily variable to preserve, how common are these in the rock sector?
That's the question. We have probably a few thousand examples of massive sulfides. Now, how many of those massive sulfide deposits can we mine? Well, just like diamond deposits, we've discovered hundreds of diamond-bearing kimberlites, but how many of the diamond-bearing kimberlites are being mined at any one time? 1 or 2. Because they'll put everybody else out of business, they say. We are bigger than anybody else, and we're going to put you out of business. And same sort of thing. Massive sulfide deposits. This little one we're going to look at in Italy, the only reason it worked is because it didn't have any competition back in Roman times. They thought, hey, we found this chalcopyrite, and we'll mine a little bit of it, and we'll try and smelt it in our furnace right here. And they were doing it on a very small scale. That's why they were in business, and they could sell copper to the Romans. Anyway, I'm taking too long. So this is 350 degrees Celsius. Is this boiling fluid? Why isn't it boiling? No, it's not boiling. Yes. The pressure is so high. Okay, well, let's skip over this. So what happens when you gradually submerge a styrofoam cup 1 to 2 miles in the ocean? The average depth of the ocean is 2.3 miles. So this shows you. There's the styrofoam cup. If you submerge it, this is what it'll look like when you bring it back up. What has happened to that sorry cup? It got crushed very gradually. They load it down on the chain and brought it back up, and that's what it looks like. It's at those depths, the pressure is incredible, and even though the mid-ocean ridges have fluid that's at 350 degrees, it should boil at 100 degrees. But even at 350 degrees, it's not boiling because the pressure is so enormous. Just according to our standards. But what's the real pressure? This is not working. So what happens when you gradually submerge a chunk of ocean floor in the mantle? Okay, we got to gradually submerge a styrofoam cup 1 to 2 miles. Is that even touching the surface of the pressures that are going down? Imagine if you submerge this, 60 miles. What would that styrofoam cup look like?
A diamond.
Yes, a diamond. Correct answer. So, when you submerge a chunk of ocean floor, it starts out like this in the mid-ocean ridge, and then after a few million years, it'll get to look like this. So what happens between here and here? And the mid-ocean ridge happen. I mean, the hydrothermal fluid circulating through there. They're going to keep circulating water until this gets cooled off to background temperatures. How long does that take for a volcanic complex to really get cooled off down to garden variety temperatures, 2 degrees C at the bottom of the ocean? It's going to take a while, but the oceans are going to work on it until they cool it off and they grow new minerals. What do you think these new green minerals are right there? Yeah, serpentinite and chlorite and what? Epidote, other green minerals that form at the surface. And what's the weight percent of water in this rock? No, that's the density. What's the weight percent of water in that rock? Now probably closer to 2 to 3 because it's got chlorite, which is 10% water, and other very water-rich minerals. But what's the volume percent of water? If the weight percent's 2%, the volume is even higher. You can't believe how much water is in this rock. I wish I had a picture of a sponge, and I wish I could squeeze it out. This is basically a sponge that's got lots of structural water in it. That's why its density is 2.8 versus 3. That's the difference, is the water and the hydrous minerals there. So after you cool that off, and then what's it going to do? We're going to eclogitize this ocean floor, and what's the density going to do? It's more dense than the mid-ocean ridge fresh basalt by a significant amount. So this is what we're going to be dealing with at the Servet mine. It's eclogite, and you're all going to walk away with samples. Ooh, this is really cool. Sulfides plus eclogite, and they're mixtures of the two. You'll have great fun. And John McBride, even John, was excited about this, and he was filling up his backpack. Oh, this is a great sample. Oh, this is a great sample. And even a geophysicist can be excited about rocks. Hard to believe, isn't it? So, this is the section of what the ocean floor looks like. Pillow basalts up at the top, sheeted dikes below that. This whole section is going to be green by the time it gets to the subduction zone. I heard someone speculate that the entire volume of the oceans were circulating through the mid-ocean ridge system once every 10 or 20 years. That's hard to believe. That's preposterous. That's not possible. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something in that range. The amount of circulation that's going on and those vents that are chugging out sulfides left and right are enormous. So why don't you find sulfides every place right now? You got to be thinking about that question. Okay, here's Cyprus, some abducted ocean floor, pillow basalts, sheeted dikes, gabbros, pushed up on Cyprus. So here is the most common rock type on Earth, right there. That's it. Isn't that nice? Oh, it's just so nice. Yes, pillow basalts. By far, that's the most common rock type at the surface of the Earth. It's not granite. It's not mud. It's, could be slightly covered with a little bit of mud, but it's basically pillow basalts. That is very impressive. So the question is, how do they form? How do these pillow basalts form? There was kilometers of it every place, but how do they form? Just like this. One pillow at a time. There's a flow that's coming out there, and the magma chamber's erupting basalt, and the basalt forms pillows, and it drops off. Then it forms another pillow, then it drops off. Then it forms another pillow, and it drops off. Can you imagine how slow this is? Why don't they find a much better process for creating ocean floor and other things like that rather than individual pillows? They clearly didn't form several at a time, otherwise it would have been a lava flow. But nope, they formed just like that. Wouldn't that be a great job to scoop up to a pillow and take its temperature just as it's forming? So what are the hazards of this?
Didn't you say that when it erupts, it, like they're so close to it that they get dazed?
What happens is every now and then, instead of forming a pillow, it'll trap a little bit of water beneath 2 or 3 pillows. And what happens when that water heats up? Yeah, this is close to the surface, then it'll send out a shock wave and it'll blow up. And if it sends out a shock wave, what's going to happen with this diver? Yeah, they've got great pictures from Hawaii of these guys diving, and every now and then it'll trap a little water and then it'll create a little explosion. And the divers get dazed until they get knocked out, and they float kind of senseless for 3 or 4 seconds until they come back to life and they resume their work. But it's hazardous. But isn't that a cool job? Wouldn't you like to go down and measure the temperature of pillow basalts as they're forming? So anyway, feel free to ask questions too. If you don't understand something, if you say, I don't believe that or something like that, talk about it. So here's another question. So here is umber and sediments. Here is a massive sulfide deposit encased by pillow lavas. And it's kind of irregular because it's been faulted and offset. And it's not the normal geometry, but it looks like it has generally an elliptical shape that's been faulted. But what's this umber stuff? What the heck is umber? Ooze? That's close, but you can do better than that. Yeah, well, I asked you before, did you know it then? No, you didn't. So I've got the Wikipedia entry on umber. So here's what umber is. It comes from various rocks in Italy that are limonite, manganese oxide, and other ochre, and raw umber comes from Umbria in Italy, another sample of natural umber, and there are various types of iron oxides plus water. But they are abundant around massive sulfide deposits. But the good massive sulfide deposits we mine don't have any umber. What's going on here? So this is the good diagram of a massive sulfide deposit. You can see a stringer zone down here where it's got little bits of veins of sulfides, and then there's a big mass of laminated, irregular, layered sulfides, and then other stuff on top. So in 3 dimensions, this is kind of what it looks like. Same sort of thing. And this is where there was a hydrothermal vent, and this lasted until it cooled off the rocks and deposited all the sulfides, and then it died out, and the tube worms moved elsewhere, and everything else abandoned it until it got new lava flows on top of it, and moved off to the side of the ridge. Got any thoughts on this? So how big could these massive sulfide deposits be?
Miles wide.
Could be miles wide, but I think it's usually less than a mile. But they're high grade. They're 100% sulfide down here in the core, and they're zoned, but they're not like a Bingham deposit. It's typically less than a mile. Some of the largest in the world are the red dog deposit in Alaska and others that are mammoth. But we don't see good massive sulfides being formed on Earth today. So how can they be so represented in the rock? And we know they happened, but they're not being formed today. What is wrong? I asked this before, and maybe you didn't get it. Here's another view of the same sort of thing. So there's barite, lots of things going on. These are happening on Earth today, but they really don't form like they show here. People are saying, okay, this is what it looked like in the rock record, and our massive sulfide looks like this and has the same geometry, but there's something slightly different. We're not forming really good massive sulfides today. So this is the way the chimneys look today. They're kind of like this, and they're oxidized on the outside. And this is a cross section of a chimney. You can see the central vent of where the black smoke was coming up. It's lined with chalcopyrite and other things like this, and the oxidation rind. But here's a good massive sulfide deposit from the Selwyn Mountains up in Yukon. These massive sulfides are deposited on the ocean floor as part of a black shale sequence. Do we have any really good black shales being formed on Earth today? And if not, why not? There's only one place on Earth that I know of where it has good anoxic conditions. That's in the Black Sea. And the Black Sea is, it's anoxic just if you go down a few hundred meters, and then there's no oxygen, and it's capable of forming black shale and massive sulfides. So years ago, when the Red Sea was being formed, I'm kind of trying to skip over this and hurry. What there is happening right today is currently there's briny water that's being dumped in the axial rift in the Red Sea, and there's briny water that's being formed here. And here's something that's similar. Here's a brine pool in the Mississippi, in the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, so this is the Jacuzzi of Despair. It's kind of warm. You could slide into this Jacuzzi of Despair, and it would be basically like a ocean that are of the past. So there are times in the past where we have anoxic conditions worldwide, and we just have an oxygen-rich layer at the top, and then everything else beneath it is very anoxic. How often did that happen in the past? Many times. And during these anoxic conditions, black shale was more abundant, and massive sulfides being formed at the ridge were preserved. That's the difference. So this is something you need to see. I'm sorry, I'm...
Alright, we're about to touch in.
I just want to get the camera in there.
This is the Nautilus going into
Might
the
be hard.
Jacuzzi of Despair.
This will go to 0.
So there's the bottom of it. It's just sliding into the pool. The camera's going to take a look.
That's way cool.
Hercules went fishing, and now he's going swimming.
Now it's going swimming.
Super.
Neat. Sick.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Can you try to zoom on Argus?
It's like an EP.
Yeah.
Look at the interface.
Alright, that's fine. Look at that interface. Oh! Very nice, very nice.
That's awesome.
Are the pressures maxed?
They're pushing hard.
Okay.
Trying to get
Pushing really hard to try to get down.
Yeah.
Trying to go down a meter. They're cranking.
the flow just keeps us up.
Yep, here we go.
Alright. That's so we're gonna float out of the brine.
So we're able to float up out of the
The
brine so
vortex.
Hercules is possible.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
That is neat.
Well done, Jim Brandon. Well done.
So can you see what happened there? They found a brine pool that's stratified. And is there any oxygen down there in the brine pool? No, there's no oxygen. That's why anything that falls down into it is dead. So how about organic matter that's potentially going to form petroleum and other things like that, or black shale? It's all going to be preserved because it's there's nothing that can oxidize it. And in the past, when the oceans ran oxic, all of mid-ocean ridges that were belching out sulfides left and right, they were all perfectly preserved. How much oxygen could get at them? Nada. They couldn't get at them at all. They couldn't rust them. And you have massive sulfide deposits piling up left and right. And we can find out when these periods of anoxia that occurred in the oceans, they produced giant petroleum deposits and massive sulfide deposits at the same time. Once again, all good things come from hydrogen sulfide. And there's a lot of hydrogen sulfide in this pool. As a matter of fact, they show anything that reaches into it and spends very much time at all are going to become sulfidized, and they're going to have sulfides start to deposit on them, and it's going to die. It's basically pickling them and turning them into dead stuff. It reminds me of the time, I've told you some of these stories before, about when we canoed across the Okefenokee Swamp. How much oxygen is present in the Okefenokee Swamp? There's lots of other things that are decaying on the bottom, and there's so much decaying vegetation that they strip all the oxygen out of the water, and you can take your canteen and you can dip it into the water and drink it straight. And you don't have to worry about bacteria. There's not a speck of bacteria. Why is that? Too little oxygen. The bacteria can't grow. So you can drink the water. It's low oxygen, but it's something you can drink at least. And you can swim in it. You just have to come up for oxygen. It's like we all do. Anyway, there's certainly questions that you don't understand. You want to watch it again?
So why do you think the water's so murky there in the brine pool?
It's briny. It's really not murky. Once they go into it, you can see deep, but it's just the amount of salt in it. It's 4 to 5 times saltier than the ocean. It's kind of like the Great Salt Lake, but
anytime you go into an interface like that, you always see a murky top layer. You can do that with fresh water going over ocean.
That's right. That's right.
Same feature.
Yeah. Why doesn't it mix? That's a good question. Anyone got any answers to that? Why doesn't it mix? 3,000 feet. And not much of a current. And how heavy is that water compared to the ocean water? Oh, it's far heavier. It's going to sit down there on the bottom, and it's going to be happy where it is. And unless some horrific currents come up, it's going to sit there. And sometimes, currently we have a well-stirred ocean, like right now. And exclusively of these little brine pools and the places in the Red Sea, the ocean is well-stirred. But at times in the past, for reasons we won't discuss here, anoxia occurred throughout the oceans and preserved petroleum and massive sulfide deposits. What time is it? Okay, we've got plenty of time. You need to watch this again.
About to touch in.
I just want to get the camera into it.
So they have their submersible. They're gonna submerge themselves in the jacuzzi of despair.
Splash.
Not much of a splash.
Oh, cool.
That's way cool.
Hercules went fishing and now he's going swimming.
Super.
Neat.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
How hard is it for them to get into those pools? You have to push the thrusters down hard.
Alright, that's fun. Look at that interface. Oh. Very nice.
That's awesome.
Are the thrusters maxed?
They're pushing hard.
Okay.
Trying to get
Pushing really hard to trying to get down.
Yeah.
It's trying to go down a meter and they're cranking.
the float is keeping us up.
Yep, here we go.
Alright. That's so we're gonna float out of the brine.
So we're able to float up out of the brine.
vortex.
Hercules is possible.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
That is neat.
What you're seeing there is a recreation of the times when we had anoxia in the oceans, except it can be won't be that salty, but also there'll be anoxia beneath it that nothing will live very well. So I just wanted to make sure you understood the anoxic oceans, because that's how sulfides, massive sulfides, are preserved. You got that? I've probably beaten that to death. Oops. So here's where we're going, actually. We're going to go from St. Marcel up this windy road. We're going to stop here at Druges, and we're going to walk down the road and see these medieval furnaces and furnaces that were operative during the 1800s that used exactly the same technologies. They basically had a place for stoking it with charcoal and creating some billows and just basically doing what Nephi did in Oman, where he created billows, got the charge of iron ore hot enough that they could reduce iron in their furnaces and then beat it with their hammers. And they did the same thing. They roasted the sulfide ores, and then they opened it up, and they put it in the furnace and did the same thing. Anyway, then we're going to go around to the Servet mine, and we're not going to go down here and see the manganese mines that are being mined at the same level. I didn't emphasize that, but manganese occurs on the ocean floor in mineable quantities laterally off to the side of a massive sulfide deposit. So here's what you're going to see. Here's the places that you're going to see lots of eclogite right here in these rocks, and you're going to have a great time picking it up and hauling it back because you don't have any samples of eclogite in your collection currently. This will be the only place where you can get it also laced with sulfides. That'll be a great day right there.
Dr. Keith,
Yes.
The very first picture you had on like the opening slide, that really cool like rock.
Yes.
Will we find stuff that looks like that here, or is that like?
We'll get to that. So back in 2005, Jake Hunter and his wife Beth, we went to this mining site, and we were struck by the guts of these miners when they would have to walk up these steps. Looks like Gandalf going to see the high fells. Yeah, that's about what it's like. They could break off, and then you plummet to your death. But it's not actually that high. There it is right there. But here's the miner's hut. But it takes some nerve to actually walk up these steps because you can fall and you definitely get hurt. And so they've removed all this because they don't want tourists falling. This is Disneyland for Aosta Valley, so they don't want this to be a cause of lawsuits. And here's in the olden days, here's what the mine portal looked like in late May. So the mine opening, and it was full of snow because this is high in the Alps, and the snow got so deep that it probably blocked off the mine entrance, undoubtedly. But in late May, it had melted this much, and there's Jake bending over, and he's seen the oxidized massive sulfide layer that's present. The reason it's green is there's so much water present, it oxidizes the sulfides. And why do you think the miners left this area right here and didn't mine it? Undoubtedly, I'm sure that's the real reason. What happened was it got to be non-economic. There was such a small amount of sulfide that I thought, it's not worth our time. You know, even for us desperate miners in the Middle Ages, we're not going to try and go after this. But where it thickened up, they mined it and smelted it and carried it off. But the mining techniques were probably a lot like the mining techniques used in the 19th century down in the Tinnick district. So what was mining like there at the beginning of the 19th century, late 1800s? Hand tools. They basically had a hand tool, and they would hit a what am I thinking of? Chisel, and get it just deep enough that they could actually break the rock out. And it would go really slow, incredibly slow, but that's how all of these mines were made, hand tools. And you can see why they had to say, well, this is not worth our time. But on the interior, they mined it and made a profit. So I just wanted to show you what it would look like when we get there. This was late May when we got there. Still a lot of snow. And fortunately, we're going to be about 3 weeks later, and all that snow is going to be melted. But we'll undoubtedly pass many, many alpine ibex like we did, back in May. They're every place. You can oftentimes walk up to them pretty close, but lots of fun. And you can look up these on the web and see lots of great pictures. You can see them skinning up on the surface of a dam to lick the salt off. I sent that picture before. They'll dig their claws into the kind of pebbly surface of the dam and use their tongue to lick the salt off the dam. Yes. And Chris has some good pictures of alpine ibex playing left and right. Anyway, I think you'll love this. And here's Jake and Beth Hunter. And what do you think they're doing here? Put a caption on this. That's a BYU bag, a bookstore bag. So what are they doing? No, they're trying to enter the BYU bookstore contest of being in the most obscure place, holding up a BYU bookstore bag and getting on the surface on the BYU website. Now, we didn't stage this picture quite right. What there are is they're in 2 adjacent tubs filled with water, alpine spring water. Yeah, that didn't come out too well, did it? But they had the guts to immerse themselves in this ice water that was probably right at the temperature of freezing. And anyway, we thought it would be a good picture. Didn't turn out quite as well. But they got wet for the rest of the day. And you can see the larches here are just coming out. And everything looks brown because the larches are just now coming out. But 3 weeks later, this forest will look green. But you'll see huts like this every place. The entire Alps are covered with huts like this where people lived, and they would come up during the summer with Heidi-like experiences and people, and then go back down in the winters. But these are the places people would live during the summer to have their goats, cows, and other things like that vegetate in the alpine meadows.
How old are these? Is this like medieval or?
These are probably 1800s, and the same thing happens today. They have nicer huts, but these are left over from the early 1900s. So here you can see a little bit of a space under that hut. What's the space under the hut for?
Runoff?
Typically, there's a full story down here underneath the hut. And people don't live down here. The people live here. What's that? For the animals. And this is why they herd all the animals in there. Why do they herd the animals in that spot, just beneath them? Think about this.
Maybe there used to be wolves or bandits.
Wolves or bandits.
Help keep the building warm.
Keep the building warm, yeah. Got all these animals under us. We're going to have the heat from the animals to help keep us warm. But if you have the heat from the animals, what do you also have?
Smell.
Yes. I can't imagine living like this with your cows and your goats underneath you. But apparently that's the culture, and people still do it today. Not as commonly, thank goodness. Yes. And here's the meal that you'll all have, left and right. Just good Italian pizza. This is the personal pan-sized pizza. And you'll get, after a day of hiking and other things we'll put you through, you can easily eat one of these, like Liz is doing. Now, I have a great story to tell you about Liz. On this trip, it was a 10-day trip, she was missing her boyfriend because we were in Italy for 10 days and she was alone. And Jake and Beth were married. Annika didn't have a boyfriend, but Liz had a boyfriend. Well, during the last day, we were checking into a motel, and it says that we passed out the keys and said, okay, this is your key, this is your key. And Liz ran up to her room and opened the door, and guess who she saw? Her boyfriend, kneeling down with a wedding ring in hand, proposing. And we had staged all this. We had the good sense that we were not needed then. We would have loved to be present, but just to see the shock on her face and see her say yes. But discretion is the better part of valor. But she said yes, and it's all happily ever after. How many kids do they have now? 2 or 3?
Yeah. And they're going back to relive that movie.
So she'll be one of the alumni that you'll get to meet. Did a great thesis. So you just saw the main course. This is the salad. You can just you can kind of grange with the vegetation and just eat right off the cactus. Because these cactus are edible, as you can see. That's had a bite out of it, and Jake is going to take another bite right there. So fruits and vegetables. What fruit is this over here? Can you figure that out for me? You should know this. We know that this tree grew in the Garden of Eden. No, not olives. No, there's no mention of olives in the Garden of Eden. Not pomegranates. What's the one fruit that's mentioned in the Garden of Eden? That's true. Well, no tree of life. No tree of knowledge of good and evil. But they mention another tree. This is a fig tree. Haven't you put 2 and 2 together? Yeah, fig leaves. These big leaves. Apparently they figured out how. You sew them together. So, fruits and vegetables. Range around, have your choice of the 2. But what a great climate to have those things growing. So, our time is up, and I hope you got something out of the lecture. I should have had more audience participation, but it's your own fault. And then on Thursday, next Tuesday, is that when Chris is up? Or no, Tom Morris. Tom Morris is on Tuesday talking about alpine flysch and other sediments. And then Chris and Larry, her husband, are up talking about alpine castles. So that's the agenda for next week. And any questions? Anything to mention, Chris?
Just get your papers in if you haven't got them. Probably in the next week or two, we'll be sending something out about the insurance. Remember we talked about that the first of the class. I'm still working with International Study Abroad to see if they will just register everybody, but I think you're gonna have to work with them, but it'll be easy. And then make sure you print off the card and carry it with you, just in case you twist your ankle or something and need. We'll send that out a little bit later.
Okay, we'll see you on Tuesday. Should we just close it?
What's the